One of the biggest races for South Carolina voters this year is for State Superintendent of Education.
Now, the current state superintendent, Molly Spearman, announced last year she won't seek re-election so she can focus on her family. This means for the first time since 2015, we'll have a new person in that role. Ellen Weaver is running on the Republican side, Lisa Ellis on the Democratic side. And right now, our education system is facing a lot like teacher shortages. We're still recovering from the pandemic's toll on those students, too.
That's right. So we wanted to know how both of these candidates would tackle these challenges. So I spoke with them both. And yesterday, we heard from Republican Ellen Weaver. Today, we're hearing from Lisa Ellis about issues like school vouchers and employee retention. To get right into it, I asked your opponent this exact same question to begin. South Carolina schools consistently rank in the bottom 10 of the nation. There's been a teacher shortage for years and teacher turnover issues as well, with 36% of first-year teachers not returning to that same position in the second year. So why are you the candidate to be able to fix these issues that we have with our schools in South Carolina?
Well, I think, first of all, I have been a teacher for 22 years, and teachers are natural problem solvers. So I think I bring a great skill set to the table. You know, when we talk about student achievement right now, the reason, well, there's a lot of reasons that student achievement potentially can be low, but the main one is the lack of teachers in the classroom. And so that's the first issue that we have to address is recruiting, and then of course retaining our teachers. And that starts with increasing salary, but also addressing working conditions. And the working conditions piece is where I can really start to make an impact quickly upon moving into office by looking at the Department of Ed mandates that make it more difficult for teachers to become teachers, as well as to keep teachers in the classroom. When you have highly qualified teachers in the classroom, you automatically increase student achievement. But if you're talking about student achievement, we also have to look at funding as well as class size. But the key right now is getting teachers and school support staff and bus drivers back into their jobs where they're working to help facilitate our public education system.
How specifically can you address those issues? Because that teacher retention, that's hard. It's one thing to be able to bring in new teachers, but to be able to keep them. How were you able to do that? And you mentioned bus drivers as well. School systems across the state are hurting for people at this moment, and they're trying to get more people and just fill positions to be able to give these kids what they need.
Absolutely. You know, every student in South Carolina deserves access to a high quality education. And that first starts every day with the bus driver, you know, getting students to school on time. And when I talk about shortages, you know, the focus is on teachers, but we're also lacking school bus drivers. We're lacking instructional assistants. We're lacking substitute teachers. You know, anybody that really comes into contact with students, we're missing. And we really have to address that first and foremost. And like I said, you know, you work on it by, of course, addressing salary. We've got to remember that the teaching profession is, you know, competing against every other profession that exists out there. And so we've got to make it competitive. You know, the fact that first-year teachers at the bare minimum are making $40,000 and having to choose between moving out of their parents' house or paying their student loans. But then we've also got to work at retaining teachers, and that's going to look different depending on what year you are in teaching. You know, to retain a fifth-year teacher is going to look very different than to retain somebody like me who's been teaching for 22 years. You know, I think you look at, you know, access to professional development and extended degrees, you know, help that fifth-year teacher get a master's degree. Whereas with the veteran teachers, the 22 plus years, you're looking to give them opportunities for leadership pieces, but you're also looking to take things off their plates really so they have the time and energy to mentor the young teachers. So I think that there's a lot of things that we can do to look at, you know, to that retention piece, but it's not going to look the same across all levels of teaching, because whether you're a third-year teacher and a 22nd year teacher, you don't necessarily need the same things. And we've got to start looking at the different, you know, points of teaching and what those teachers need to make them want to stay in the profession.
You and your opponent have drastic views on exactly how to address these issues. You guys differ on a lot of topics. One specifically, she talks a lot about vouchers and making sure that that money is tied to each student and school choice. She's advocating hard for school choice at this time. You specifically mentioned on your website and your platform you are against vouchers. Why?
Absolutely. I think, one of the issues when we talk about student achievement, we've got to look at our schools have been underfunded since 2008. So the answer is not to take more money from public schools. The answer is to put money into public schools and then make sure that the public schools have the flexibility to fund what they need. A school in Richland 2, their funding needs are probably going to be a lot different than schools in Jasper County. And again, we've got to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the children based on where they're located. I think, school vouchers, we've seen Arizona, we've seen Florida, it does not work. It does not, improve our public schools. And I don't think that students and families realize that they're not open for everybody. When you're talking about moving public money out of public school systems, you're talking about giving them to private schools, parochial schools that do not have the same accountability and do not have the same transparency, as well as they can choose who they want to enroll in that school or not. When we talk about the public education system, we talk about it from the fact that we accept and educate every single child that walks through our doors, regardless of the issues that they bring with them. And we also have to look at public education differently as not just a benefit, but as a requirement to a civilized society. When we talk about educating our students, whether or not you have your own children in school or grandchildren in school, our society benefits from a well-educated, public educated society. And public education is about educating the whole child and how they compete against the rest of the world. So we really have to think differently about public education and recognize that it is a pillar of our society.
And Ms. Ellis, you had mentioned it as well. You want to do what's best for the child, but you may have some parents sitting at home watching this and thinking, well, what's best for my child is giving me a choice, letting me decide that my child should be homeschooled as well as possibly go to a charter school, and money should be carried along with them is because that is their taxpayer dollars responsible for their child.
Yes, I understand that, but I think what we're forgetting is that parents already have choices. So, you do have the choice of whether you want to homeschool your child. You do have the choice of whether you want to send them to a different learning environment or whether you want them to learn virtually, while sitting at home. Those choices already exist. A lot of our public school districts already have choice within their school districts in terms of magnet programs and career and technology programs. So the idea that choice doesn't already exist is false. But again, it's not like, if we're talking about tax dollars, you pay your taxes to the roads, and it's not like you only get your own paved road done. Like paving the roads with that tax money is about taking care of all of South Carolina roads. It's not just about taking care of you and yours. Does that make sense?
It does. And real briefly, I want to ask you about this because I noticed on your platform right now, there's a study that came out that said only half of schools in South Carolina have mental health services. You specifically mentioned that that's something you want to do and something you want to prioritize. How do you get that done real quickly?
Well, that takes place. That's the funding piece, right? So last year, schools were underfunded $700 per student. And so when you're having to make up that money, that funding then allows school districts to pay for mental health services, to pay to hire social workers, to pay to hire school nurses, all of those what we call wraparound services, but you've got to have the funding piece. And so if we're talking about, taking care of our children, our schools have become the panacea for society's problems. We're no longer only able to focus on the academics. We've got to focus on all aspects of the child. A third of our students are in poverty and receive 2 of their 3 meals at school. So, but that's got to take funding. So if we want students to be able to learn academically, we've got to meet their physical and mental needs first before we can even talk about calculus or talk about earth science or something like that. And that funding piece is what is critical and what has been missing that has led to sort of the crisis that we're in.
All right, Ms. Ellis, for us this evening, wish you and your opponent the very best of luck. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, if you missed our interview with Ellis' opponent, Ellen Weaver, we have it available for you to watch right now at foxcarolina.com as well as our YouTube page.